Right. Yeah. The three questions that Jesus asks in the Bible, and as Terry mentioned, that's what we want to look at over the next 3 Sundays. Just before I start though, I'm going to describe this as a no-holds-barred challenge to us all. Okay? It challenged me when I was writing this first part, and I think it will challenge you. And today we're going to look at the first of the questions, this question to Peter, one of his disciples, asking him simply, do you love me? But before we do that, just by way of an introduction, I would like to tell you the why behind why we're looking at these questions. And quite simply, it's about ordinary women and men in communities, church communities, and the types of community that they are or that they want to be. Jesus is asking us through these questions, what kind of people do we want to be, both individually and corporately? So just to explain a bit further, Terry and I attended a talk in November given by a guy called Alan Emerson, who is the leader of 24/7 communities in the UK. And he was talking about his new book called The Cruciform Leader. And in that talk, he talked about communities and what it means to be a cruciform leader. Now just to explain, in Grace Church, like every organisation, we recognise that we need a little bit of help to get things to run smoothly. Now it might not seem like that in this church sometimes, but we do need that help. Okay, so we have trustees, we have a senior leadership team, we have people that set up, we have people that provide all the coffee and food in the morning and things like that. Now that is a type of leadership, but that's not the type of leadership that Alan Emerson was talking about. In his book, he defines a cruciform leader based on his analysis of the early leaders of the church. He says, hopefully this is going to work. Oh, look at that. The pages of the New Testament reveals what is possible when ordinary men and women are seized by an unflinching confidence in the gospel and a consuming captivation with Jesus. I am convinced the women and men of today's church who embody this cruciform way, those who are seized by that unflinching confidence in the gospel and a consuming captivation with Jesus, true shepherds who call the people of God back to the ways of Jesus Christ, will be those who carry the real spiritual authority in the church today. Whether they have recognized titles or not. Ordinary women and men. It's not about your personality. It's not about your charisma, your jokes or your music, Terry. Organisational or corporate leadership structures, wealth or fame. Authority is not about position. It's about your posture. Now in Grace Church, we have a number of sayings. Put them on the slide here. There's only one leader in Grace Church, and that's God. Well, we might challenge that just in a minute. Keeping the main thing the main thing. Being present in His presence. The vision is Jesus. God's love, God's truth, God's power. What do all these things refer to? An unflinching confidence in the gospel and a consuming captivation with Jesus, the cruciform way. I put it to you now, it would appear that God, by His grace or in His grace, has given us, Grace Church, the same awakening and focus as other communities, as indicated by Alan Emerson in his book. Ordinary women and men. That's me, and that's you. So what does it mean for us individually? Do we, or how do we embody or start to embody this cruciform way? Hence, the starting point, the three questions posed by Jesus. Do you love me? Can you drink this cup? What will you do with what you've been given? As mentioned earlier, Jesus is asking us through these questions what kind of people we want to be, both individually and corporately. So what about the first question? Do you love me? If you have a Bible, then you can turn to John 21, verses 15 to 19. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, the words should appear, not will appear, should appear on the screen behind me. But before we read these verses, I just want to set the scene, the context of the passage that we're about to read, a prequel to the conversation that's about to take place. So Jesus has been resurrected, and after his resurrection, he appeared to many people. But this is the third occurrence of when he appears to his disciples. 7 of them, in fact. So, instigated by Peter, these disciples went fishing. And having been out fishing all night, have caught absolutely nothing. As the night was ending, they see a stranger on the shore. He tells them to lower the nets on the other side of the boat, and to their surprise, they catch 153 fish. And the net says that. Yeah? John, one of the disciples, then recognizes that it's Jesus on the shore. At which point, Peter jumps into the water and rushes to the Lord. The other disciples then follow in the boat, and Jesus ushers them all to sit and to eat. And that's basically the scene, a summary up to the start of the passage that we're going to read. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time. "Do you love me?" he said. "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Imagine yourself in front of Jesus and he asks you that first question. Do you love me? Now, I don't know about you, but I imagine Peter is caught off guard and maybe even surprised when asked the question this first time. What's going through Peter's mind? Well, Jesus has called him Simon, not Peter, on whom Jesus would want to build his church. That's Matthew 16:18. Peter has spent 3 years with Jesus, learning from him, seeing miracles, having received power to heal and drive out demons, seeing the servant heart of Jesus, Jesus' love for the poor, for the lost, for his friends. Peter knows about love. In John's Gospel, we see Jesus teaching on love to his disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command. Love each other. Guys, there's no doubt that Peter knows about Jesus' love. Jesus has called Peter his friend. And that if he keeps Jesus' commands, he will remain in Jesus' love. He has told them, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. What's Jesus this time? And yet, Peter, only a few weeks before, had done the thing he vowed he would never do. It says in Matthew 26:33. He boasts, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Wow. 3 times Peter had denied he even knew Jesus, as Jesus was laying down his life. I sense Peter's inner turmoil, his shame. What's more, Peter has just jumped into the water and ran to the Lord. Was this a reminder to him of when he walked on the water towards Jesus and then began to sink because of his lack of faith? What about the other miraculous catch of fish? Just like his first encounter with Jesus. Is that another reminder? What's more, Jesus is doing this right in front of everyone. I imagine Peter is feeling pretty uncomfortable at this point. But what about us? Do these sort of things from the past make us feel unworthy, shamed like Peter? It does for me. And like Peter, I'm meant to know about love. And I question myself, do I really know this love? And yet, what does Jesus do? You see that Jesus doesn't bring up any of the things that Peter's thinking. He doesn't focus on Peter's mistakes or former sins. He doesn't focus on mine. He doesn't focus on yours. He just doesn't do that. Jesus is not there to increase Peter's shame, but to dissolve it in grace. Peter is about to experience a radical forgiveness, not by having his sins pointed out, but by giving a chance, actually 3 chances, to say yes to the unconditional love of God. And no, Peter's restoration has nothing to do with his ability, his position, his strength. Jesus doesn't give Peter the quick out. I'm sorry, and let's move on option to rescue him from the awkwardness of the moment. Jesus goes straight to the heart of the matter with a question. Do you love me? Here, Jesus is simply after Peter himself. And to do that, he has to restore Peter as the rock on which Jesus will build his church. An ordinary man on his way to discovering the real meaning of love. Let's take a closer look at our passage and how Peter himself was restored by Jesus' question. This first question, do you love me more than these? Perhaps has a double meaning for Peter. Is Jesus asking Peter to compare his love for Jesus to the love that he has for the fish that he's caught? After all, Peter has gone back to fishing. Does he think that Jesus has abandoned him? That he's not good enough? And that fishing is all that he's good for? Or is Jesus asking Peter to compare his love for Jesus to the love that the other disciples had for Jesus? We know already that in front of others, Peter had already claimed to have loved Jesus more than the other disciples, but then had subsequently denied him 3 times. Imagine his inner struggle, an examination of himself. Have you ever felt abandoned by Jesus? Now, just interestingly, the first 2 times Jesus asked this question, do you love me? He uses the word agathos for love, which means or speaks of an all-giving, uncaused, unselfish love. But Peter doesn't use the same word for love to answer Jesus. He uses the word filial, which basically indicates a friendly affection. Peter's answer is basically saying, I am your friend. I believe Peter at this point is simply saying that his heart is open to Christ, and that Christ knows that he loves him with the best love of which he, Peter, a sinful human being, is capable. You know what? I know how Peter feels. Now, after Jesus had asked Peter, and Peter had answered, Jesus twice gave Peter an instruction regarding how he should act towards God's people. Feed my lambs, tend my sheep. The idea was that Peter could demonstrate his claimed love for Jesus by feeding his lambs and tending his sheep. And notice the emphasis, okay? The sheep don't belong to Peter, they belong to Jesus. But Peter is given the task, Jesus is giving Peter the task of being the shepherd of the sheep that belong to him. I think slowly Peter is beginning to realize that Jesus really does love him and values him and still wants him to do his work, despite everything that's gone on in his past and his denial of Jesus. Then Jesus asked Peter a 3rd time, do you love me? It seems that the 2 previous questions Jesus asked in the presence of the others were not enough to accomplish what Jesus wanted to do in the life of Peter. Jesus had to ask him the 3rd time. And we see that Peter was grieved because of this. However, I believe Peter understood the significance of the question being asked the 3rd time. It was a plain reminder to him of his previous 3-time denial. And here Jesus is giving Peter an opportunity in some measure to repair his fault by a triple confession that he loves Jesus. And Jesus, in effect, comes down to Peter's definition of love. He slightly changes his question the 3rd time, adopting the word Peter has used for the world to love, to show that Jesus understood. He asked Peter if he did in fact have a brotherly love, a friendly devotion to Jesus. And we then see that Peter did believe that he loved Jesus. Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Yet he relied on Jesus' own knowledge of all things. I think Peter understood at that point that Jesus knew him better than he knew himself. So Jesus didn't ask Peter, are you sorry? Will you promise never to do that again? Jesus challenged Peter to love. What about us? Like Peter, do you still have a proud estimation of our love and devotion to Jesus? Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? Not so that Jesus would know. Jesus already knew. And Peter was aware that Jesus knew. It was for Peter's self-examination. And may I suggest, our self-examination that the questions are asked. Jesus Christ asked each one of us, primarily, not for obedience, not for repentance, not for vows, not for conduct, but for a heart. And once that heart is established, all these other things follow. Jesus restored Peter in the presence of the others by causing him to face squarely his point of failure. Then Jesus challenges Peter to set his eyes on the work ahead. We see this in the rest of our passage. Here, Jesus is speaking of Peter's past and his future. He reminds him of his younger days, when he had less responsibility and could do more as he pleased. I think I'm still in that category. Okay, we know what our younger years were like. Regarding Peter's future, the phrase, "you will stretch out your hand," had significant meaning in the time of Jesus. It meant crucifixion. Jesus was telling Peter that he would die on a cross. Peter understood what Jesus meant, and this must have been a chilling revelation for him. But it also gave Peter assurance. Jesus is placing Peter in a category with himself. A life spent for God and ultimately sacrificed to glorify God. In the crucial moments a few weeks before, Peter had denied three times to save Jesus, three times to save himself from the cross. Jesus assured Peter he would face the challenge of the cross once again, and he would embrace it. And in fact, we see from the ancient writings that about 34 years after this meeting, that Peter was indeed crucified. However, it says that in his crucifixion, Peter deemed it so glorious a thing to die for Christ that he begged to be crucified upside down, not considering himself worthy to die in the same posture as Christ. Jesus' last words to Peter were, "Follow me," or more accurately, "Continue to follow me." Years before, Jesus had called Peter to follow him. Now Peter knew that continuing to follow Jesus would mean a certain cross. Like Jesus, guys, like Peter, Jesus has come for you and for me. Do you surrender yourself to Jesus, relinquishing all that you have to Jesus? Peter was being prepared throughout his life for this moment. And the question, do you love me? Why? Because God has a much more expansive vision for your life. To become like Jesus, and as a result, participate in his mission for the world. Peter could only accomplish the things he went on to do. The preacher at Pentecost, the healing of the lame man, the leader of the first churches, the instrument through which the Gentiles, you and me, were saved by truly relinquishing himself and his life to Jesus. The children coming back. You get someone just to follow? Yeah. So, guys, how would you answer the question that Jesus asked? Do you love me? It's not an easy question. It's challenging. But you know what? It's a moving on with Jesus question. Jesus wasn't after the "I'm sorry" response with Peter. No, he was after much more. In the first instance, again, I'm going to repeat this. Jesus isn't asking for obedience, repentance, for vows, for conduct, for a heart for him. Jesus knows us better than we know ourselves. Let's give him our heart first, and everything else will follow. How do we do this? I think by continually asking the question that Jesus asked to us, do you love me? If we do that, I think we can start to embrace that cruciform way we talked about at the start of the talk. Can we become the ordinary women and men, a people, a community that are seized by an unflinching confidence in the gospel and a consuming captivation with Jesus? Can we be true shepherds who call the people of God back to the ways of Jesus? That's our challenge, guys. And we'll leave it there. If you need to talk to someone about this talk, or you'd like someone to pray with you, or just talk with you, okay, there will be a prayer team at the end, okay? God bless.